Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of John and Ann Bender? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the death, then offer my analysis. John Felix Bender was born in 1966. His father was a well-known legal scholar who worked for the Clinton administration. John's parents noticed that he was intelligent from a young age. He was also perfectionistic, competitive, had a temper, and wanted everything his way. He was generally able to get along with his peers, but preferred being alone. At some point, John developed bipolar disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. But he was able to function reasonably well. John studied physics at Penn State and went to work in a government-sponsored high-tech weapons facility. He lost interest after coming to believe that careers in physics are all about developing weapons. After visiting a friend at the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, John started buying options. He was able to use his keen intellect to earn a lot of money and start his own hedge fund. From 1992 to 1996, John attracted major clients, including George Soros. In 1996, John was on track to be a billionaire within a few years. He bought a 100-acre farm in Virginia. Now moving to the background of Ann Bender. Ann Bender was born in Rio de Janeiro sometime around 1971. Her father was an executive at Chase Manhattan. Like John Bender, Ann developed bipolar disorder. During what may have been a manic episode, she moved to Virginia. In 1998, Ann was introduced to John Bender by a friend. They had a lot in common, including bipolar disorder, wealthy parents, and the belief that their family histories were unusual. John and Ann became romantically involved and eventually married. The couple's net worth was about $600 million, overwhelmingly due to John's contribution. The couple purchased 5,000 acres in the southwest edge of Costa Rica for $10 million. John had long desired to live among nature. He had about 500 workers build a compound in the jungle. Construction took 4 years. When it was complete, John renounced his U.S. citizenship and moved to Costa Rica along with Ann. The compound included 4 houses, a moat, and a helipad. They named it Bora cayenne. They incorrectly believed this was the name of a local plant species. The main house sat on top of the highest mountain in the area, about 2,500 feet. The massive house had 4 stories. What it didn't have was windows or external walls. It was like a series of discs separated by space. In the day, wildlife would just come right in. At night, storm doors were closed. Locals called the main house the Bender Dome, and the Big House. John hired armed guards, in part to deter poachers who were known to frequent the area, and hired 6 full-time caretakers for the compound. In April of 2001, John was arrested so the police could serve him with a summons. He was being sued by someone who he had done business with in the past. The local population started to get annoyed with John because his guards were chasing away hunters. John was advised by a security expert to leave Costa Rica. He and Ann stayed in Canada for 3 months before returning to the compound and hiring guards with more extensive military training. These new guards were involved in a gunfight with an intruder one night in 2002. John and Ann were already paranoid and under stress. This pushed them over the edge. Especially John, he suffered a manic episode. He purchased more guns and fortified the compound. By 2008, John's legal problems were resolved. The couple invested $90 million in a trust in Costa Rica. They believed this protected them from any further legal claims. The trust was a shelter overseen by a local attorney named Alvarez. Even without the perception of money problems, the couple was not doing well emotionally. Ann was depressed and having trouble walking. She purchased hundreds of authentic and reproduction Tiffany lamps to improve her mood. She had 550 of them. John felt as though he had failed Ann. He should have been able to make her better, but she was only getting worse. The couple started isolating from other people at the compound. They spent all their time together. John started to believe that water from the area could magically cure Anne. He also gave her daily injections of some unknown substance. Now moving to the timeline of the death. On January 8, 2010, sometime around midnight, Anne claims that John retrieved a Ruger P95 9mm semi-automatic pistol and pointed it at his face. She reached for it and grabbed it, but it slipped out of her hands and mysteriously discharged, killing John. Anne called security for help. When they arrived, they saw her covered in blood, crying over John's body. They also noticed 3,000 gems all over the room, which were valued at over $15 million. All these gems were legally owned by Anne. No taxes were due on them. The police arrived in about an hour. They were somewhat interested in John's death, but they were very interested in those gems. Anne was questioned at the police station and sent to the hospital. She was covered with infections and open boils from those injections. She only weighed 80 pounds. Her mental health clinician declared this to be a case of Folie, deux, shared psychotic disorder. I'll talk more about this in the analysis. Anne stayed in the hospital for 6 months. When she returned to the compound, she found the police had seized almost all of her property, including the gems. In August of 2011, Anne Bender was charged with first-degree murder. She was acquitted. Prosecutors appealed this verdict. In Costa Rica, there is no double jeopardy. A person can be tried multiple times, even if they are acquitted. At the second trial, 2 witnesses changed their story from the first trial. On May 28, 2014, Anne was convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison. She appealed her conviction, and it was overturned in February of 2015. At her third trial, she was once again acquitted. She returned to the U.S. In June of 2017, this acquittal was annulled. A 4th trial was ordered. It seems unlikely that Anne is going to return to Costa Rica to face that 4th trial. Anne was devastated financially. The lawyer that John Bender trusted, Alvarez, took at least $20 million and vanished. Anne was able to get $4 million of her gems back after paying a $1.3 million fee to Costa Rica. I guess this was a delivery fee, as in a fee delivered to the pockets of corrupt officials. Now moving to my analysis. Was Anne Bender guilty? Let's take a look at the evidence pointing both for and against the idea that she was guilty, starting with the inculpatory evidence. John's body was found lying on his back on the left side of his bed with his face pointed to the left. He had been shot once in the head. The bullet came from the back and right. This would be where Anne normally slept. John was left-handed. His right hand was by his waist on his right side. There was no gunshot residue on John's hands. There was gunshot residue on Anne's clothes. There were no signs of a struggle. It appears as though John had been sleeping when he was shot. Moving to the exculpatory evidence, Anne made no effort to get away or hide her husband's death. Over $15 million in gems were in plain sight. She did not try to take them or conceal them. On several occasions, John said he wanted to end his life. He wrote one email to that effect about a month before his death. The investigation was a disaster. The police had no idea how to conduct an investigation, and they were corrupt. For example, they took the gems. When weighing the evidence, do I think Anne was guilty? I don't think she was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't trust any of the inculpatory evidence presented by the police in Costa Rica. They were hopelessly corrupt. The gunshot residue, the angle of the bullet wound, there is no way to know if any of that is true or not. As far as whether or not Anne was guilty in reality, I'm just not sure. There is no reliable information on which to base an opinion. If I had to guess, I would say that she was not guilty in reality. What about the mental health aspects involved in this case? As I mentioned, both John and Anne had bipolar disorder. One mental health professional who interviewed Anne believed the couple had folie à deux. This is otherwise known as shared psychotic disorder. This is when one person becomes psychotic and they transmit it to another person. A lot of the time, these people are in close proximity, often just with each other. So I guess in this case, the idea was that John was the primary partner. He developed psychosis first, then he transmitted it to Anne. She was the secondary partner. If this case did involve shared psychotic disorder, it may have been what's referred to as induced psychosis. That's when both people start off psychotic, but the primary partner introduces new delusions to the secondary partner. So in essence, they're both subject to delusional thinking, but the primary partner is setting the pace. That person's delusions are the ones that become prominent. John appeared to have a number of persecutory delusions, which are fairly common in shared psychotic disorder cases. Perhaps those became shared, and the paranoia led him to using that weapon. As far as the bipolar disorder, mania is an interesting symptom in that it can become more dangerous when the person who has it has access to resources. Mania often involves grandiose plans that would be quite expensive to execute. In this case, however, John had hundreds of millions of dollars. He could not only satisfy the grandiosity, but the persecutory aspect by hiring armed guards. In a sense, John was able to fuel his mania and the associated psychosis with money. The money served to amplify the destructive potential of his symptoms. Moving to my final thoughts, John and Ann Bender had a few reasons for building a compound in Costa Rica. They wanted to be closer to nature, they wanted to get away from society, but they also wanted to cure their mental health disorders. It is certainly a creative idea, but it caused too much stress for them and isolated them from mental health treatment. These various mental health and criminal cases that I cover all contain some type of lesson. Sometimes they demonstrate what a person with a mental health disorder could do to help themselves, and other times it's more like what not to do. In this particular case, we learn that running off and building a heavily armed compound in the jungle is not a good way to address bipolar disorder. Those are my thoughts on the case of John and Ann Bender. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis to be as intriguing as a massive windowless house in the jungle. Thanks for watching.